In the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford sits a clay prism, catalog number WB444. It was written around 1800 BC, and it is small. You could close your hand around it. One line on it reads, "The flood swept over." The line above that says, "A king ruled for 28,800 years." The line below says, "The next king ruled for 1,200. Nobody has ever explained why the number falls off a cliff at exactly that word. In March 2025, two universities, Cornell and Tel Aviv, built an AI that can finally read the tablets nobody had time to translate. There are about 500,000 cuneiform tablets sitting in museums. Only a fraction have ever been read. So with the machine that can now read them, we did something simple. We lined up the oldest king list in the world against the oldest flood story in the world. You'll see why the lifespans collapse at one single line. Why a second, completely unrelated text says the collapse was done on purpose. And the one number that shows up, untouched, in three civilizations that never met each other. Because if the drop were just a myth, it would be sloppy. Made up. Rounded off. It isn't. It's mathematically clean. And that's the part that is hard to look away from. Start with the prism. The Weld-Blundell Prism, WB444, is the fullest copy we have of something called the Sumerian king list. It's a record of the kings who ruled the land between the rivers, going back to the very beginning. The top of the list is strange. It names 8 kings who ruled before the flood, 8 men, and it gives their reigns an accounting system built on the number 60 units. The Sumerians called the Sar, worth 3,600 years, the Nir, worth 600, and the Soth, worth 60. Add the 8 reigns together, and you get a single figure, 200 years. 8 kings, 241,000 years. Then comes the line. The flood swept over, and the moment you cross it, the numbers break. The kings after the flood don't rule for tens of thousands of years. They rule for hundreds, then for spans that look almost human. Here's the thing scholars noticed but couldn't explain. The fall isn't gradual. It doesn't fade out over a few generations. The new detail here is that the collapse is a single clean line, 200 years above it, hundreds below it, with nothing in between. Not a slope, a wall. A number that clean usually has a reason. And one tablet, written about a century later, gives one. So why does the number fall off a cliff at one word? A second tablet says it was done on purpose. The tablet is the Epic of Atrahasis. Old Babylonian, written around 1700 BC. It's one of the oldest stories humanity has ever told about its own origins. It opens with the gods making people out of clay, mixed with the blood of a slain god. Humans multiply. They get loud. The gods send a flood to wipe them out, and one man, Atrahasis, survives it in a boat. But it's what happens after the flood that matters here. In the Atrahasis story, the gods sit down and make a decision. They decide humans will never again live the way they did before. So they invent limits. They invent women who cannot bear children. They invent the death of infants. They invent priestesses forbidden to have children at all. Plups. Brakes on human life and human numbers. The new detail here is that this second separate text supplies a motive for the cliff in the king list. One tablet shows lifespans collapsing at the flood. A different tablet, written by different scribes, says the collapse was a choice, that human life was deliberately shortened, not life ending by accident, life being capped. Not a disaster the gods regretted, a policy they wrote down. If it were only Mesopotamia, you'd shrug. One culture, one strange story. You'd move on. It isn't only Mesopotamia. Three civilizations that never met. The same number, the same fall, the same trigger. Open the book of Genesis, chapters 5 and 11. A completely separate tradition. And a different language, Hebrew, not Sumerian. A different people, writing on different material, far from the rivers of Iraq. And it has the same shape. In Genesis 5, the men before the flood live for impossible spans. Methuselah, 969 years. Others past 900. Then comes the flood, Noah, the ark, the water. And in Genesis 11, right after, the lifespans fall. Not to zero. They drop, generation by generation, down toward 120 years. The same drop, the same trigger, a flood. Then go forward in time, more than 1,000 years, to a Babylonian priest named Berossus. Around the 3rd century BC, in the age of the Greeks, he wrote a history of his own people. And in it, he records the same kings before the flood, with the same giant reigns. The new detail here is that 3 unconnected records: Sumerian clay, Hebrew scripture, and a Greek-era priest 1,500 years later, all carry the same collapse at the same line. The number survived 500 years and crossed between cultures without breaking. Now, be honest about what that does and doesn't prove. These cultures shared a region. Stories traveled. Shared geography can explain shared myth. It is not, by itself, proof that anyone lived for 28,800 years, and we are not going to pretend it is. But it does sharpen the real question. Is the number arbitrary? A nice round myth somebody invented? Run the math. Two for 1,000 years. Then 1,200 at one line. Is that drop random or is it engineered? Go back to those 8 reigns before the flood. If they were just myth, you'd expect messy numbers, made-up numbers, numbers that don't fit together. They aren't messy. Every one of those reigns is built out of the Sumerian counting blocks, the Sar of 3,600, the Nir of 600, the Sas of 60. Clean multiples of 60 stacked together. The reigns aren't random at all. They're constructed. Engineered out of the same base 60 math the Sumerians used to count everything else, the same math that still gives us 60 seconds in a minute and 360 degrees in a circle. And this is where the AI finally earns its place in the story. Be precise about what it actually does, because most of the internet won't be. There are 2 systems. The first is ProtoSnap from Cornell and Tel Aviv University, presented at a conference called ICLR in April 2025. It uses a diffusion model, the same kind of AI that generates images, to match a perfect prototype of each cuneiform sign onto a worn, broken photograph of a real tablet, pixel by pixel. It rebuilds damaged characters. It reads signs a human eye can barely make out. The second is a dataset called Some Tablets, led by a researcher named Cole Simmons, presented in 2024. It pairs 91,006 Sumerian tablets, 6. 970,407 individual glyphs with their transliterations. A model trained on it reaches 9755 CRAR-F accuracy at turning the signs into readable text. Here is what these tools do not do. They do not find hidden messages. They do not translate secret reports. ProtoSnap reconstructs characters. Some tablets turn signs into text. Neither one decoded a buried meaning, and anyone who tells you it did is selling you something. That is the honest line, and I'm only going to say it once. What the AI does do is scale. The new detail here is that, for the first time in 4,000 years, we can check a pattern like the floodline cliff against the entire surviving corpus at once. Yoram Cohen, the Tel Aviv archaeologist behind ProtoSnap, says his goal is to increase the ancient sources we can read tenfold. One human reads a few hundred tablets in a lifetime. The machine reads 91626 before lunch. So we can finally ask, across everything, is that clean break at the floodline a quirk of one prism, or does it hold everywhere? That's the question we couldn't even pose before now. And here's the part that's quietly unsettling. WB444 has been sitting in a glass case in Oxford since 1922. The King List was first published in 1923. The cliff in the numbers. 241,200 above the line, hundreds below, has been visible on that prism for 100 years. Nobody hit it. Nobody had to decode it. It was right there in plain sight the whole time. What didn't exist until 2024 and 2025 was the ability to lay that one prism beside every other tablet at once and ask whether the pattern was real or a coincidence. The line was always readable. The scale to test it was not. A clay prism in Oxford, 100 years in a case. And the question underneath it stayed unasked, not because it was hidden, but because no one could hold the whole library in their head at the same time. There's one more thing about that line. The standard reading is, the flood swept over, water arriving, water destroying. But some translators argue the verb can also carry the sense of a sweeping that was completed, finished, brought to an end, not weather rolling in, an act with an end state. Be clear, that is one defensible reading among several. It is not a new translation handed down by the AI. It's a possibility in the grammar, nothing more. But hold it next to the numbers for a second. If that reading holds, then the cliff in the King List isn't a disaster happening. It's a change being finished. Not a flood arriving, a process completing. The rains don't fall because catastrophe struck. They fall because something was done, and the doing was over. We don't know if that's true. We may never know. What we do know is the object. A fist-sized clay prism, catalog number WB444, in a quiet gallery in Oxford, walked past every day by students who never looked down at it. On it, 8 kings, 241 200 years, and one line where the count breaks clean. The machine that can now read 500,000 more, like it has arrived. We finally have the tool to read them all. The harder problem is admitting we still don't know what the numbers we're counting.